So I'm going to take you through how I recreated Rapper's Delight for my assignment. So I recorded my bass direct input through my bass amplifier and then through my Scarlett 2i4. I did some some pre-EQing on the actual amp with a lot of mids, but then I also did a lot of reamping in here using the vintage tube EQ on Logic to give it some drive. This compressor gave it a bit of distortion, obviously dulled the peaks. I did a fair amount of comb filtering, as you can see, to take out a lot of rings, string noise. This to just give it a lot of presence, a lot of punch like in the original. And then Ozone 8 Elements stereo imager to basically narrow the stereo image, so it makes it sit a lot more central, which you get with a lot of aspects of this mix. Guitars, I recorded through a Fender Twin valve amp using a Neumann U87, a DI box, and an SM57. Gave it a nice clear full tone just so I could shape around with it. Took off a lot of the top end, well, dulled it a bit to make it sound kind of tinny like in the original. Nice jangly Nile Rodgers effect. A little bit of reverb on it to give it some presence, which I also placed narrow using the Ozone Elements imager. Compressed it, another vintage EQ, same as the bass. The vocals, so to emulate the three members of the Sugar Hill Gang, I did 3 different recordings, two with an NT1A, and Hank with Audio Technica 4040, and I also down-tuned the formant on the Hank recording, so they sounded like 3 separate rappers. I also added a little bit of distortion, as you can see here, some shaping EQ. This is an emulation of this little shout, which I flex pitched, put a little bit of reverb on, and I basically did my best to make it sound as close to the original as possible. I'll give you a little listen now. What you gonna do today? You're gonna get a fly girl, yeah, just wanted that to sound really far away. Wanted it to emulate the high rising pitch of the original. The pianos, in the original, they're quite playful, quite tinny, not a lot of massive high frequency definition on them, so I attempted to emulate that with these effects here, as you can see on the channel strip. I played this in live and then used the MIDI transform humanize function, which basically just varies ever so slightly the velocity and the timing, makes it sound a bit more human, less robotic like MIDI is. The string stabs, so these string stabs over here, I'll give you a play. To emulate that, I essentially got a Logic software string instrument and the end hiss ring of a Logic software instrument crash cymbal, combined them together, added a bit of noise, bounced them down, and just did a lot of like shaping, comb filtering EQ, added quite a lot of reverb to make it sound really far away, really sort of dull like it does in the original. Same with the Ozone Elements stereo imager, places it very local in the stereo field rather than wide across it, so you can make it sound further away, because there is a lot of space in this mix. A lot of things like the drums and everything sound in one position, they're not spread out across the whole stereo field like you tend to get in a lot of stereo recordings. The drums, I used Logic's Drum Kit Designer using a producer kit called SoCal as the preset, or SoCal Plus. You can pick your kick, you can dampen, tune, you can pick every element of the drum kit, and you can do all of this to it. So for everything like the kick and the snare and so the stuff that's been used, I've turned off the room so I can get down to it and process each sound individually to get them as perfect sounding as possible. So like this hi-hat, as you can see, I've taken off all the bottom end because it's very defined up in the top end. It doesn't sound like a natural hi-hat because it's very, if I show you into how high up that is, sort of hissy. So I've tried to emulate that a bit. You can hear there. I've got a lot of punch in the kick, so it carries through as in the normal, and a very tight snare. DS to take off some of the buzz. Yeah, that's that. And then claps, I randomized and alternated 4 different recordings of claps, which are panned hard left and hard right respectively. Gave them some line noise and stuff, which emulates the original. So I give you a play of that. And then something I also did with the claps over here, if you listen, they start off in the intro with lots of reverb, and not quite panned hard left and right, and then after the vocals say so about here, if you listen, there's suddenly no reverb on the claps. They are now panned hard left and right. It's just an example of hard editing. In the olden days, cutting the analog tape, lack of continuity because of a lack of time or something like that. So I've emulated that as best I could. So
the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat. And
so I've automated those changes in so that it emulates that original recording as much as possible. The intro percussion, I've got some congas playing both full hits and rim shots rhythmically, imitating the original. This is all in the intro, these bits. Couldn't quite emulate the vibraphone in the original perfectly, so I've laid a couple of vibraphones and a couple of cowbells, given them a lot of distortion. Like as you can see, I've used a pedal board to get some more advanced gritty sounding effects, and a shaker layering the percussion. And then I basically, after this, bounced it all down, put stems into a mix down project where I did a mix to get the balance better, and then I bounced that down after doing a little bit more processing, and did a master to bring the levels up as much as possible using a multipressor, the exciter on neutron elements, and the maximizer on ozone elements, and the equalizer on ozone elements, just to get as close to the tone and level of the original as possible. And finally, I also did a fade out at the end here, and some automation, which I forgot to mention, on the volume structure of the piano, because there are certain parts of the piano that stand out more in the mix than others. I think that's just because of space in the mix, but I'd already recorded my guitars, so I did this to kind of compensate for that. Basically just means little motifs like this and this stand out more in the mix.
The purple and the brown, the purple and Wonder Mike, and I'd like to say hello.
And the rest. Yeah, that's it.